All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Hoeven. I'm the ecosystem engineer at the Stellar Development Foundation. Today, I want to talk about DeFi on Stellar Turrets. But first, let's talk a little bit about myself. This is me. Again, my name is Tyler. I've been at the Stellar Development Foundation for about 2 years, but I've been in the Stellar ecosystem for probably about 6 years, building Stellar-based applications and learning a whole lot of things. I help run Stellar Community Fund, Stellar Quest. If you haven't checked that out, definitely go and give that a try. Fun gamified way to learn Stellar. But today we're going to be talking about smart contracts and DeFi and the initiative that I've been leading for a little over a year now called Stellar Turrets. You may have heard it referred to as TSS or the Turing Signing Server Network, but its official name now is Stellar Turrets. Its goal really is to beat this traditional centralized system. So in these DeFi systems, you've got decentralization where there isn't this centralized issuance of people back and forth, the relationships back and forth, where there's a centralized third party that you have to trust to either hold assets or communicate about those assets or value transfer. In DeFi, you remove that. Stellar doesn't natively have this. We don't have a virtual machine that allows you to compose transactions in a decentralized manner. We have decentralization in transaction execution, but to be able to get a transaction created and pushed out onto the network, you have to compose that in some centralized system. Most of the time, a lot of times, that works okay. But as systems really begin to move and DeFi gets more attention, it becomes important to have a solid solution built that would allow for both transaction execution as well as transaction creation done in a decentralized way. So this traditional model here, it's not terrible. It's the way that most of the world works right now, where you've got a user or maybe an API service that is interacting with some controlled account, some service provider accounts. We might refer to this as a custodial model. Again, it's okay, can work in a lot of scenarios, but it's very much not in the spirit of DeFi. So that's where Stellar Turrets comes in. It's really only adding one piece of a DeFi puzzle. Stellar, the protocol, already has the other piece of decentralized transaction execution, where the actual state of the ledger and who has how much money and what payments have been made, all of that has been tracked, and that's being stored in a decentralized way. It's really the creation of those transactions, the instructions that modify or mutate the state of the ledger. That's what we're talking about when we approach Stellar Turrets. So last year at the previous Meridian, I gave a talk on kind of the overview of Stellar Turrets. We're not going to get super into it, but I would like to touch on how it works, particularly where we've come. So Stellar Turrets is organized around a working group, a Discord community that is implementing this, that sees the value in this proposal, and is building out a protocol through a reference implementation. So we've been working for quite a while now and have made a lot of progress since the last time we talked. So some of the protocol stuff has changed, but the basic core premise of decentralized transaction creation and signing is still there. So let's talk about our pieces really quick. So if you remember, really what we're trying to do is get a user access to a controlled account. You've got somebody that's got money or a service or some value, whatever that might be, in some account. There's money in an account. There's a service that's locked up in an account, and you need to be able to interact with that as a user. In a traditional model, you just have to trust them. If it's a donation pool or some sort of account that manages money, you have to trust that they're not going to run away with it, or there might be contracts in place, etc. But in a DeFi world, we don't want there to be this centralized third party that can just run away or disappear or shut down. We want it to be more resilient than that and more trustless. More trustless, interesting. So the way that we are implementing this is through this concept of turrets, by really implementing the multi-sig feature that Stellar has baked into it. We're utilizing that through the use of these Stellar Turrets, which are servers, which host contracts. So we're gonna have these entities here. We've got controlled account, turrets, the user, and then the service provider. We're kind of splintering this thing up so that we can control and manipulate those individual parts in the way that allows us to accomplish this decentralized finance use case. So the first thing that happens is the service provider, the one that would like to provide the service, has the innovation, that's got the idea, they're going to create contracts. These are the smart contracts, if you will. In the Stellar turrets, particularly the reference implementation that we have right now, this would be a JavaScript function that produces an XDR. There are reference implementations in work right now that would maybe be Golang or C#, Rust, and others. But for my purposes, I'm a JavaScript engineer. So the contract reference implementation that I've built uses JavaScript. So you write a JavaScript function that will produce an XDR, that will create some transaction that is intended to modify or manipulate or take advantage of this controlled account, right? So it's going to be just a very relatively basic JavaScript function that produces an XDR that it is intended to involve the controlled account and probably the user as well. And it uploads these to this contract, this same JavaScript function to these individual turrets. In this case, right here on the screen, I've got 3, but it could be a number. One of the beautiful things about turrets is you get to decide the makeup of your network. You can be as decentralized or as centralized as you want it to be. You can have as many or as few signers as makes sense for your protocol. In this case, we've got 3. So I take a JavaScript function code and I upload it to these turrets, and those turrets then send me back a signing key. This signing key is what the turret will sign the XDR with whenever the contract is called by the user in the future. So there's a JavaScript function that will run, produce an XDR, and then it's going to use a signing key to sign that XDR and then send that back to the user. So in this case, it's going to send the signing key back to the service provider, which is then intended to upload that to the controlled account. So now the contract is going to have a direct link to the controlled account where those two things can interoperate with each other, and yet no single party owns that controlled account necessarily. The service provider may choose to remove themselves from the controlled account. They upload these, in this case, 3 signers, maybe in a 2 of 3 signing scenario. So at least 2 of the turrets need to sign the transaction for it to be valid. You're free to kind of make up that network as you see fit, as it works for your use case. You might leave yourself as the service provider as a single key signer, so you don't have complete control over the controlled account, but you still have some final say before the transaction is actually executed with a final signing key. So once we've got that, the service provider can essentially sort of disappear from the scenario, assuming that it's no longer a signer. Ultimately, the idea being that it at least doesn't have complete signing power over the controlled account. I guess there could be scenarios where it does, but still there's some very specific scenario through which users can interact through the turrets with the controlled account, utilizing those contracts, which produce very specific XDRs. And so now it's time for the user to interact with those turrets. So they will send requests. Basically, when the contract is uploaded, a hash is generated, and that's becomes an API endpoint that the user will then call. And this user can be an actual individual person. More often, it'll probably be users interfacing with some front end, and that front end will be calling the turrets directly on behalf of the users to help obfuscate some of the API calls. But ultimately, the idea, again, that a user is going to interact with a controlled account. There may be UI, UX elements in between these pieces to obfuscate some of the complexity, but the essential idea being that a user is going to call contracts that produce XDRs that will then be signed by those turrets, as you can see in this example, right? The request goes out from the user to the turrets, an XDR will come back to the user, and those XDRs will be signed by each of those individual turrets. You add those signatures together, and now you have control over the account, but only through the specific instructions that the contract produced inside of each of these turrets. Now, the big key here is each of those XDRs has to be the same. It has to have produced the exact same XDR from each of those turrets. Otherwise, the signatures won't add up. You might be able to sign it, but because it's not the same, the hash won't be the same. So when you finally go to submit it to the blockchain to modify the state, if it's insufficiently signed or the XDRs don't match, it won't be valid and won't make it to the final leg of the journey. So you can see here, if we take a closer look at that user interaction, as those XDRs with the signatures come back, the user combines sufficient signatures to that XDR and then submits that to Stellar. That's the goal here, is that through the contracts, you get a very specific transaction that was produced in a decentralized way that's now sufficiently signed that you can submit it to Stellar. And that third party was never involved because they relinquished control, or they gave over control of a very specific action for that controlled account to the turret network through the contract, so the users can interface with that controlled account safely, specifically through those turrets. Sweet, fantastic, very cool. That's what we've built over the past year. We've created this protocol that allows for this type of functionality. It's not very complex, but it's very powerful, and it's incredibly useful because now, instead of having a centralized single third party that has to delegate interactions with their controlled accounts to users, they can give that control up to a turret network. And now the network handles that creation and signing of transactions, and the third party can kind of just step away and maybe focus on building interfaces or just marketing the idea that they have, or if there's fees that's being charged, instead of having to deal with a lot of the infrastructure and keeping up their servers and monitoring their contracts or control accounts. They build everything up front, hand it over to the turret network, and now it just works. So since we've built that, I think the next big thing is, so who's using it? Great, we've built all these things. Is it proving to be something that the ecosystem finds interesting and is beginning to implement? Well, the whole point of the turret network in the first place is this was something that was valuable. Questions that are being asked. If I've got a donation account and nobody trusts me to be a custodian of funds, what am I supposed to do? You hand over your controlled account, your donation account, to the turret network through a contract that dictates through the contract's governance code how payments are made. And so we start to see ecosystem participants beginning to take notice and implementing it, or at least actively exploring the opportunities. So we've got, as I mentioned, our Discord, and I'll call that out at the end. But I think definitely our biggest player right now is a team called Script3. They are building some very interesting yield products and lending protocols on top of the turret network. So it's kind of this combination of Stellar turrets with just traditional smart contracts you can build atomically with Stellar transactions. So it's this beautiful combination of these two things to build some really complex and powerful protocols. I would highly suggest, if this type of thing is interesting to you, to familiarize yourself with that team and the products that they're building. They're working on their yield blocks protocol right now, should be launching before too long. I was a part of that beta a couple of weeks ago, and it's very interesting. And they've helped drive forward a lot of the innovation that we've been working on the turrets protocol, and then actually testing that in the real world to see if it stands up. Another interesting one, not to toot my own horn, but I've been doing some smart NFT stuff. So it's kind of this fun, silly NFT things, but showcasing some really powerful use cases of combining these smart contract functionalities with NFTs, where you've got an NFT and it's an asset and it's fun to sell, but what about entirely new market mechanics and NFT experiences built around smart contracts, where people don't have to trust me? I can just be an artist and upload my NFT, or I guess attach a smart contract signing contract to my NFT account and begin to sell my NFT through a particular smart contract experience. Lots of fun going on over there. So be sure and check those out. I've got some nice drop documents that explain how I'm utilizing the Stellar Turrets protocol with these unique NFT sales. Another project that's launching with NFTs soon is Task.io. They've been doing a lot of work as well on the Stellar Turrets protocol, implementing it with their ecosystem. Both of the Script3 and Task.io were SCF participants, Stellar Community Fund entrants and winners. So really neat success story there. So as these protocols are interesting and you have innovative ideas for protocols you'd like to build, be sure and look into the Stellar Community Fund as an opportunity to get some backing and funding and even community and feedback around the projects that you want to build. Another one that I think is honestly more exciting to me is, particularly with the launch of the smart NFTs and yield blocks, just a lot of attention coming to our Discord and the protocol as it's begun to mature and get used. That Discord has grown a lot, and there's been a lot of interest from companies like the Aqua Network working on their token, a couple of different swap protocols, Lightmint, the gaming platform. So there's lots of NFTs going on there. So there's royalty payments opportunities that are very interesting. One of a cool story between smart NFTs, the work that I've done, and Lightmint is because this is this decentralized sort of API backend, it's relatively simple to transfer use case between different front ends. So they've actually got one of my smart NFTs for sale on Lightmint through their interface, because it's not locked to any particular interface. It's all decentralized. So long as you can access the same APIs, you can interact with the same market mechanics and essentially purchase the NFT in the exact same way that you would on any other front end, so long as that API is used in the same way. So that's very cool. And a whole nice focus and a use case there of taking something through the smart contract, building that out, and then seeing it land on different front ends is really being a showcase of the beauty of DeFi. And then also the JPEG DAO. This is a newish product. Again, it's sort of in the NFT space. There's a lot of interesting innovation happening in the NFT space. It's very exciting to me. So that's another project to keep an eye out. They're looking to implement Stellar Turrets to help them decentralize a bit further with their giveaways and governance mechanics. So very excited to see kind of where they go. Beyond that, I think it's worth looking a little bit as we close up on the timeline of Stellar Turrets. So it's been a long journey. I put in a ton of work, from lots of different ideas that didn't pan out to where we are now with a really solid protocol. We just finished our third-party audit of both the protocol and the reference implementation. So a couple of low-risk items to work through there. And we'll be ready for continued participation in getting up and ready for actual public network turrets. A lot of it's on testnet or partially open. So you might have like a small network of public turrets open, like the smart NFT work that I've done, or is actually done on the public network, but through a very controlled list of public turrets, so that you can configure these things freely and openly at whatever makes sense for you. And then as stability comes and more turret servers are stood up, that begins to open up more and more on that decentralized nature. It's nice the way that it's built, where it's not an all or nothing. You kind of can pick and choose your level of decentralization that makes sense, or the amount of trustlessness that you need. So that one's coming. That one's going to be done pretty soon. Next up is Horizon and turrets. This is a pretty important one, I think. As we've dug in deeper into what's actually needed for a smart contract protocol to be built at scale and at a production level, we're going to need to customize some Horizon endpoints. So rather than relying on either Stellar Horizon endpoints for our data ingestion, or even just relying on the way that Horizon is set up specifically, we need some custom endpoints to allow for the specific use cases that Stellar Turrets, the smart contracts, most often work in. So getting data that's very specific to the work that smart contracts are most often involved with. So it would be specific accounts or specific assets, just increasing the security and speed that turrets can operate at. Next, I think we're looking for a public beta release. So actually getting some public Stellar Turrets stood up. Again, I mentioned we already have a couple of those, but they're kind of invite only. You can only upload the contracts once they've been whitelisted and audited by the network. I'd like to expand that. And so we need more participation and more people getting involved, working on these public Horizon endpoints and working through any outstanding issues and making sure that we're growing the right way so that we're able to do this public beta release late next year. And then beyond that, it's really just DeFi. So once we've built this protocol and it's out there, it's just innovation station. Come and build whatever tickles your fancy. This combination between what you already get within Stellar, the speed and efficiency for financial innovation on top, or really at the core, and then with this layer 2 Stellar Turrets protocol built around that, just this very powerful combination for building out innovation. So I'm very excited. And to close it out, thanks for watching. And please join our Discord, turrets.stellar.org/join, to get involved in the exciting things that we're doing with Stellar Turrets in this DeFi layer 2 solution that's being built on top of Stellar. Thanks for watching. Appreciate the time. Go and have a great Meridian. We'll catch you guys later. Bye.